So as most of you know, my dad and I just got back a few weeks ago from our second trip now to the Philippines. We left to go there on January 10th, and then we came back February 7th. All right, so here we have a map of the Philippines. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, we were on the island of Palawan, which you see right here. We flew into Puerto Princesa. So here's a closer map of Palawan, and right here you see this town of Borland. We were very near there, just a little ways north. So you will hear that name from time to time. So it was January 10 when we left, but the story starts a little before that. We had about 1,000 problems with our tickets that involved a whole lot of phone calls, and we actually went to the airport twice to get everything worked out. But God got it worked out for us. We just had to wait until He sent us the right person to help us. So we ended up going, myself and my dad were flying together, and then Travis Maloney and Shane and Matthew and Dustin were all on separate flights from us. Those four were together. So we were all leaving from Chicago on the same day, but my dad and I left from Midway Airport, and the other four left from O'Hare. And then we would meet up in Manila. We were all spending a night there, and then flying to Puerto Princesa on different flights the next morning. So Joe is actually the one who drove us all down there. We thank him for that because it was a blizzard in the middle of the night, all the way to Chicago. So I don't know how he made it back safely. I guess there were angels on every side of that van, but we're glad he made it. So I don't know how the flights went for the other guys, but for my dad and I, every single flight, the entire trip was delayed. So I guess if one's going to be delayed, it's a good thing they were all delayed. We got to Manila, and it was late one night. We couldn't check our bags until the next morning. About 2 hours before is when they let you start checking your bags and getting your boarding passes. And this was, I guess, probably already the third or fourth miracle that God worked for us. The other guy's flight was 3 hours before ours. That flight had filled up, so we were on a later flight. So they went through line, and they only had 1 or 2 bags each, and they were being charged hundreds of dollars to get their bags that last 40-minute flight. So when they got through, they came over and talked to us and told us what they were charging for weight. And here our tickets didn't include any baggage for that last leg of the flight. So we added up the cost they were getting, and my dad and I had 4 bags, mostly full of tools. And it was going to cost $500 to get those 4 bags the last flight. So we're praying and trying to figure out what we can do, and somebody suggests maybe you can ship them as cargo instead of airline luggage. So I go out of the building we're in, and I'm walking through the Manila airport, which is not a place that you think of when you think of an international airport. It's very sketchy. So every little ways I find a security guard, and I explain what I'm doing, where I'm trying to go, and get another set of directions because I don't want somebody coming up behind me and arresting me because I'm where I'm not supposed to be. So I find where their cargo area is, and there's people hauling boxes and bags and stuff all over the place, and I find somebody to talk to. And what I got from him was that we could send our bags for $160, for $60. But there was no guarantee on when they would arrive. They put them on a plane when the plane has room, and they don't call you. You have to call them every day and say, hey, is my bag there yet? And then you come get it. So I'm still thinking, well, for $440, it might be worth doing that, even if we're out of our bags for a couple of days. So I go back to talk to my dad about it, and he says that he's been talking to the manager in the terminal there, and they're trying to work something out. See, since our flight was a few hours later, we could still buy baggage to go with our tickets. You had to buy baggage at least 4 hours in advance. So this guy opened up a separate line for us, which I think ticked off a lot of other people waiting in line because they were lining up behind us, and we had to keep telling them, sorry, this line's just for us. And we got our bags to go through for $160 total instead of the $500 we were expecting. So that was a blessing before we even got there. And He also printed our boarding passes for us. So instead of sitting around in this very crowded area, we got to go through to a slightly less crowded area where those other guys already were sitting and waiting for their flight. And we got to tell them the story about how our 4 bags cost the same as their 1 bag. And that was interesting. So I have a ton of pictures to show you this morning. That's actually why we had problems. There's just too many. So I'm going to go through a lot of them pretty quickly, but I'll stop once in a while and explain what's going on. So this is actually getting on the plane in Manila. It's one of those places where you just kind of walk right out on the tarmac, and the same thing in Puerto Princesa. We got to Puerto, and the first thing we did was rent bikes, just like we did last time. This video shows some of the prettier areas between Puerto Princesa and where we were staying in the town of Sapangan. If you want to see exactly where that is, you can use Google Maps, and you have to search for Sapangan. They misspelled it in Google Maps, but you'll find it there. As you can see, the roads are mediocre condition at best. There's some places here you'll see some pretty big potholes if you look closely.
Was actually Alex driving, not Travis? Sorry.
It does look faster on the camera than it actually does. That bridge just on the other side here is where I got one of the 4 flat tires I would get on this trip. You'll see some pictures of it getting changed later. Every little ways you see a rubber tire by the side of the road with vulcanizing written on it. That's what they do, is change tires there. Here's one of the prettier places along the way. You can see all these houses are right on the beach. This is on the east side of Palawan. So it's a very, very pretty drive all over this island. It started over. I would say that it was even prettier this time than last time because we got there right at the end of the rainy season, whereas last time we were in the middle of the dry season, so it was a lot greener this time. Here's some of the bikes that the guys rented. Here is Travis standing under the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with the monkey. That's his best friend in Palawan, and just like Eve with the apple, he lured those with him in. There is Matthew making friends with the monkey as well. Here's just some other sites around the compound we were staying at. That is a little, I don't know if you call it a greenhouse. It's sort of just an insect net around where they're growing some plants. That's the building that Dad and I stayed in. Our bunk bed and the kitchen and the table were all in there. That is our bathroom. You might have remembered some of the pictures from last time. They've actually added the stall on the far right is new, and it has a human-sized toilet in it instead of a toddler size. So that was actually a really nice surprise. So the building we were staying in is on the left there, and the building on the right, which you'll see in just a couple of pictures here, that is where the other 4 guys were staying. So the first day we spent most of the day in town getting food, supplies, and stuff. So we didn't really get much work done. When we got back, we just went to see the site, what the state of it was, what we would have to do. So this was Thursday that we got to the compound, and that's what the house looked like when we got there. Just the view from there. You really don't understand how big those mountains look from the picture, but it's a really, really pretty view. This is on that upper porch looking out. The other side. There's a little garden down there that they've started. That ladder, it's kind of deceiving. It looks all right in that picture, but I think that's, 11 feet up probably or so. Those steps were about as big of a step as I can possibly take, and there are no Filipinos as tall as me. So I don't know how they went up and down that ladder. They had to have jumped. So these are all the rooms when we got there. As you can see, it was still just dirt floors. The walls had been plastered but not painted yet. In some places, they were still working on the plaster. You can see at the top there. They were finishing the edges around the door frames. They do a really good job of getting the corners nice and sharp there. And they really, it's all by hand. They don't have any corner pieces or anything like we do here. So the first thing that we had to do was pour the cement, but we had to get all of the pipes in the floor first. So that's what we spent Friday doing, was getting whatever piping we needed down, plumbing down, so that we could start pouring right away on Sunday, because that was the first thing that we really needed to do. Our two goals for the trip were to get all the floors poured and to get the cabinets and counters in. That is their carabao. They use it for plowing their rice fields and general lawn maintenance. That is the state of the road when we got there. This straight ahead, in amongst those trees, is the compound we were staying at. And right behind where the person taking the picture was standing, they're probably standing on the runway there. Right now, the runway is just large gravel. It needs a lot of work. And then the house is farther behind. This road got worse and worse pretty much every day that we were there. There'll be more stories about that in a little bit. So here's us unloading some of the stuff that first day, putting the plumbing in. That's one of the guys finishing off nice around those door frames. They had, maybe 5 locals that worked there? Something like that. We had to cut those door frames so that the cement could go under them. So then, that was what we did Friday. Here is the church that we went to on Sabbath. This is the Sagpangan SDA Church. Here is where they have their potluck. This is like you just spinned around from the last picture. And that is their bathroom. The inside of the church. So we got there, and the night before, so we got there Thursday. We got to the compound mid-afternoon Thursday. Friday night, it was decided that Matthew would do Sabbath school the next day, and Travis would have the sermon. So we got there, and we found this guy who was sitting right on top of the pulpit pretty much the whole service. He was about that big around or so. So that was interesting. There's 1 or 2 people there that didn't speak English, so Edgar, who serves as the pastor of this church, had to translate. That's Matthew doing Sabbath school and Travis doing the church service. And right before, in the middle of the service, they don't have a printed bulletin there. So they have one person who's responsible for deciding or for outlining who does what part of the service and keeping everything in order. So this person will get up and give you the whole order of the service and who's doing what midway through the church service. So they'll tell you, this person did this person did that, and now so-and-so will do this, so-and-so will do that. And it's really convenient because they do this immediately before special music. So this week's, what did they call them? I can't remember the title that they gave them. But the person who did the order this week stood up and was going through the service, and she got to special music, and she said, Sir Jeff and Sir Dustin. Much to the surprise of Sir Jeff and Sir Dustin. So they fought about it for a little while, and finally they convinced Travis to go up there with them, and we got special music from Jeff and Travis and Dustin.
When I rise, in the morning when I rise, give me Jesus.
So, in true Philippines fashion, now we're going to have Clint and Dave come up and give us special music. And if you'd like to bring a third person with you, you're welcome to. And the funny thing is, you can't really say no when you're there. So here's potluck. Afterwards, the food at potluck was always fantastic. After that, I went around with, I think my dad came with and maybe one of the other guys, and we just went and walked around the town of Sagpangan. So this is the road leading away from the church. Every town there has a really nice basketball court. No matter how poor the people are, they always have a nice basketball court. It's the major sport in the Philippines. I believe that's the Catholic Church. It's just down the road from the Adventist Church. And here's just some of the houses and sites you would see in Sagpangan. A lot of houses you'll see there have these satellite dishes on them. I don't know where people get the money for them because when a person can find work there, they get roughly $6 a day for a day of manual labor. You can see out in the distance there's some little dirt-covered hills. In addition to the basketball court, the major draw of Sagpangan is dirt bike racing. So they had a dirt bike track there. I don't know if any of our crazy companions tried it out or not. If they did, they made it back unscathed, thankfully. You can see some more of the hills in the background there. Their playground, if you look closely, there's no seats at the end of those chains, and the whole thing is that color because that's rust. So then at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody comes back to church for an AY program every week. So here's everybody for that. You have Travis actually gave a 2-part sermon that day, so he finished his sermon. Those are the benches that you get to sit on for the 3 to 3.5 hours of church, and then an hour and a half or so in the afternoon. So be thankful for your padded backed seats, especially when it was, I don't know, maybe 85, probably 90 degrees inside there the whole time. So the next day, Sunday morning, we went to Oborlin, the town on the map, to the market. On Sunday morning, everybody comes in and sets up for market. So here's just a quick look through a bunch of the pictures that you see. All of those tarps that you see are hung at about 5'9". So that made going to the market fun. They would have rows and rows of these dried fish. Nothing in the world smells worse. I don't know how somebody could eat that. We had to plug our noses when we walked through those parts of town. I'm pretty sure what they do is they take their fish and they try to sell them, and anything that's left at the end of the day, they just leave out until it looks like that. That paved road that you see there is the Palawan National Highway. It basically runs from one end of the island to the other, and there's very few paved roads besides that one. A couple of the guys getting coconuts. So one of the things that we saw while we were there is this set of furniture, which I think there's some more later on. Oh, this is one of my favorite things that we saw the whole time we were there. I don't know if you can read it, This sign was on the government building in town, and it says, "A Borland post office closed from December 21st to January 16th due to management being out of town. Thank you." Anybody want to venture a guess as to what those are? There's actually 3 of them stacked together there, I believe. That's what I thought, but what those actually are baby walkers. How we have the wheeled seats for babies here, that's what they use. I don't know if the baby's armpits go under there or how it works, but that's what they told us. Those are for letting your baby walk around with. Karaoke is a huge thing there. You see signs for rentals and buying karaoke machines all over the place. The part of the meat market. Jackfruit. And they had a TV there in town that was always tuned to cockfighting. That, besides basketball, is their major sport, I think. This was our, well, at least my favorite place in town, the bakery. You see on the second shelf, not the top one, the one below it, on the far left, there's those loaves of bread that are sliced up. That's cinnamon bread with a glazing on top. Anybody want to guess what a slice of that cinnamon bread costs? It's 2 pesos for a slice, which is 4 cents. So you can get a whole loaf of it. You can probably get 2 or 3 loaves for $1, and it is delicious. I just had to put this in because Travis talked so much about how he would never let another guy ride on his bike, and then there we are, the first Sunday. Travis and Vaughn. So we had seen this furniture earlier, and we came back, decided to look at it because there was no furniture at the Labor's house. And we thought that that would be a really good gift for them to go on that upper section. It's handcrafted bamboo. It was still actually tacky from the glaze they put on it. They burned designs into it. It's really, really nice when you look at it. It was a 5-piece set. There was a table, 2 chairs, a 2-person bench, and a 3-person bench. Anybody want to guess what something like that would cost for that set? If you bought it here and paid less than $1,000, I probably wouldn't believe you. There it was $46. So we bought that and we loaded it on the truck. And that's how we got it up there. It's a good thing too, because we would not have gotten it up that ladder. It's really beautiful and comfortable. So later, this is just one of the boats at the beach that we saw. You see all the fish in the market. Fishing is one of the major jobs there. I have honestly never seen somebody in one of these boats, but they're everywhere. They must use them. That's a GP under, I would say, an average load. So this then is that first full week that we were there. We started to pour cement. And we weren't quite sure about this cement truck making it down that road I talked about. But much to our surprise, the first trip in, it made it. But this truck held about 3 cubic meters, which it's more than 3 yards. It's close to 4 yards. So we would have them come with 2 loads a day, because that was about as much as we could finish by hand in a day. So they came in with the first load, and we would unload it into wheelbarrows, wheel it into the house, and dump it. And then here's the second load. And it only got worse from there. So this is about halfway down the driveway. The good news is that this is the skidder that the tractor they use in town to load this truck. So they managed to come out with that, but the problem with it is that the tires on that tractor are completely bald. So it wasn't a whole lot of help. We actually had to dig that cement truck all the way forward about to where the tractor is to get it to keep going. Eventually, we got it up there, but a few times it would get stuck in the driveway and it was taking too long to get it up to the house. The cement was in the truck too long. So what we did is we had them dump the cement into the bucket and bring the bucket up to the house, unload it, send it back. It was still much better than hand mixing, let me tell you. I didn't find out about this right away until it actually happened, but doing laundry there is quite the chore. Even if you have one of their machines, there's still a lot of handwork to go into doing laundry. So what my dad did is he offered to buy them a stove if Miss Raylene would do our laundry for us. And let me say she did a fantastic job, because I had clothes that haven't been white for years that were white when I got them back. I don't know how she did it. Here's some of the finished rooms. Just going to skip through this really quickly. Some of the locals working on the plaster. The truck got a flat tire one of the times it came. You can actually see some of these out in the living room. The truck driver made these, so we got a few from him. That is a homemade stove that the locals use when they cook their lunch. A hammock where the chicken like to lay its egg back at the compound. And that is another SDA church on the way to Puerto. Those vans you see on the road all over there. And the checkpoints that you see. So these are just some pictures of driving around in Puerto Princesa. We had a lot of bike problems. So you will see people on bikes just weaving in and out of this traffic. When you want to cross the street, you just start walking. And if there's not a car right in front of you, you keep walking. And if you want to get onto the street when you're driving, you just go and people stop and let you in. So here's Travis. The sound is going to kick on this in just a minute, so it might be kind of loud when it starts. Just so you can see what riding around town with Travis is like.
Woo, that was close. I like it.
So I was sitting in the passenger seat here, and I am quite certain that the mirror of our truck went over the mirror of that car. Back on the work site, we took the sign off of the church, and Shane repainted it. You'll see more pictures of that later. Travis cutting out stair streamers. More work on that sign. Stair streamers going up. And there's the finished stairs. That was probably our first thing we wanted to do besides the cement in the cabinets. Here's how we did the countertops. We actually did the same kind of countertops that we have in the kitchen here. So if you go look at those, you'll see pretty much what the counters looked like. We made forms. I'm just going to skip that one because we're running out of time. So the second week, I had thought that I was going to be preaching, but the night before, everybody realized that this was going to be Travis's last week there, maybe forever. So they needed Travis to speak again. So I figured I would preach the third week. That's no big problem. So Travis got to do church again. Potluck. That first full week, we did get all the floors poured. And then Sunday, the painting started. And we also took a trip to the beach because we needed to get stones. As you can see, we put stones in those forms, and that's how you get the nice looking parts of the concrete countertop. So you put the stones in, pour the cement, and then you flip it over and grind off whatever film is left until you see those stones again. So all the different countertops that we made for the kitchen and the bathrooms. There is my dad putting the first bit of the cement in. As you can see, there's two different colors there because we have black dye that you put in the cement to give it that nice dark look, but it's expensive, so we put a layer of black and then a layer of gray. That is something that Miss Raylene came and showed us. I think this was Monday of the second week. What's left of that is about 30 inches long, and it was killed by one of their dogs who bit off about 6 inches off the end of its tail. So it was about 3 feet long when it started. Dustin enjoying a meal in town. And back to the work site where the first cabinets are going in. The counters after they're hardened. And we started putting in tile. Once the floors were done and poured, my dad and I started working on the cabinets, and the other guys decided that tile was a good way for them to continue working. So they started tiling the walls and the floors. There's my dad grinding off one of the countertops and then washing all the dust away. And I got to try my hand at cutting tile with a hand grinder. I hadn't done that before. I wish that I had done it the first time with one that would turn off when you wanted it to. Several times I had to hold it away from me and reach down and unplug it because the switch wouldn't work. So that was fun. The island cabinet. There's all the kitchen cabinets in place and work continuing on that sign. Those are the bathroom cabinets and that first counter put on the island. How many of us did we use to move that? 6, I think? That is a heavy, heavy, heavy countertop. So one day when we were in Borland, we ran into a couple of Mormon missionaries who Travis made quick friends with. So as far as I know, he's actually still communicating with these guys. So that was a really cool opportunity to talk to some people about what they believe and tell them what we believe. This is worship one night. We got together with the people at the compound and often some of the other church members just about every night for worship. The first drawers going in the cabinets. There's the finished sign when Shane got done with it. Counters all going in place. And there's the sink. There's the air compressor we got to use. I think it's older than the island of Palawan. The tile in the bathrooms going in. The sign on the church. So the third Sabbath, I guess it's in a little bit here. This is Friday of that second full week. The first week my dad had gone into town and gotten a shave at this barber shop. As you can see, it's a upstanding place. So the second week, some of the other guys decided they wanted to too. I did not want to have my face shaved by a guy with a straight razor who was getting paid 40 cents. So here's some of the pictures of that. Dustin. And I guess it was, you can turn the sound off for this one. It must have been well worth the 40 cents because at the end you got a face massage as well. Though apparently the first time it happened, my dad got a thumb in the eye, so maybe it was only worth the 40 cents. Just some more around town. This is heading to church, the third Sabbath, which I found out the night before that once again I didn't have to preach because they had a missionary coming in he had done work in Cambodia and Thailand, so he was coming to speak to the church. I think I just went backwards. So that third Sabbath afternoon, we've been planning on doing this every Sabbath up to this point, and we finally got to it. We'd been sending from here all sorts of clothes and stuffed animals and toys and stuff, and we actually got to go around up into the hills and the back parts of Sagpangan where foreigners don't go and pass out a lot of these things. So here we are. This is still in the main part of town, passing out the stuffed animals to all the kids. We went to, this is the house of a family that goes to the church, but they hadn't been while we were there because they just had a newborn baby. We were walking up to go in this house, and this little girl popped her head out of the window and was smiling and waving at me. Every time somebody comes up here and talks about a mission story, they talk about how this one particular child was the cutest little kid and the brightest kid in the whole wide world. And I never believed them. I just thought it was, oh, whatever. And now I know it's wrong because this girl was the brightest and cutest in the whole world. So there we are inside. This is a pretty average house for the area. You can see dirt floors, not much for walls either. You can just see the baby there. So we gave them some stuffed animals, some baby clothes, some clothes for the other kids. That's how they do their cooking right there. And then we went to the church, met up with everybody else, and loaded onto the truck. And we headed farther up into the hills. We crossed this river. It wasn't very deep, but apparently it does get deep because nobody in their right mind would use this bridge otherwise. You can cut the sound for this one too. So you can't tell as much from this video, but this hill was super steep and really bumpy as well. And they just drove the truck right up it. I don't think that a four-wheeled vehicle had been up here in quite some time. While we were going, I had been standing in the bed of the truck because you see we had a lot of people on top. And I didn't want to bust my knee, so I got out and took video instead. Every town has a basketball court, even if it's dirt on and baskets on trees. And this is where we stopped, at this little hut right here. This is basically the school for the kids in that area. The girl, the second one from the left in that lime green shirt, she is basically their teacher. She is 15 years old, and every week she gets together with about 15 kids from the area and she teaches them Bible stories and songs. At 15. More of the people we ran into while we were out there. You can see there's a whole family there on that bike. Matthew making sure that the girl's skirt was the right size. More of the kids. I don't know how, but word got around that we were coming because they would be waiting out by the road for us. That is, I think, the only two-story house that I saw anywhere in this area. Another one of those spiders at the work site. So, what day was it that we went into town and got the flat the first time? No, it was the day the other guys left, which must have been Tuesday of that third full week there. So we left well ahead of the other guys because we wanted to do some shopping. They were all leaving, but we needed more supplies, and we were supposed to meet them at the airport. So we left a couple hours early, and it's a good thing we did because my bike got a flat tire. That was a fun experience. So we got to stop here and get it changed. When we got the bikes, the guy told us there's a spare tube in the seat of the bike. So the guy patched the old one, which you can kind of see how they do it here. Basically, they put a patching material on it and melt it together. But we had him put the spare tube on the bike, which wasn't a great choice because in 1 kilometer down the road, it was flat again. So we got to push the bike to another vulcanizing place where we found out that the spare tube was completely rotten. So we put the patched one back on, and it would go flat again. Not on this particular trip, but by the next morning, it was flat. I really like this picture. By my best count, there are 12 people being propelled by this little bike, and that's not uncommon to see there. A few more pictures from in Puerto. This is AWA's second vehicle. The AWA worker who lives in Puerto takes this. It's called the Chariot. So here, this is after everybody else has left. We are pouring the glaze finish on the countertops here. And there, my dad is using a butane torch to get any bubbles in it to come up. So that's how you get them nice and dark and shiny and smooth. I'm just going to go through this really quick. We got the water hooked up and running, but it didn't have very much pressure. So before we left, we bought them a pressure tank that they would have to figure out how to install. So this, right before we left, I did a quick walkthrough of the house so that you can kind of get a tour and see. I know from pictures, you can kill the sound for this. It's hard to tell how a house actually looks from pictures. So here's what it looked like the day before we left. This open area out front is where they will greet people to do medical stuff and things like that, so they don't have to bring people into their actual house. There is the finished kitchen with the doors, all the shelves are in.
What part of this facility is clinic and what part is living?
That covered outside area is where they'll do clinical stuff, and then they can also bring people in that first door and up the steps to the covered upstairs, which you'll see in just a minute. You can bring people into both of those areas without bringing them into the actual living part of the house. That starts where the kitchen is. So this is one of the bedrooms. And then this is the third bedroom with a door that goes out the back of the house. A little bit of the view out back. And you could just see it at the bottom of the picture there. They're putting in an outdoor sink there for use with the garden and things like that. Here's one of the bathrooms. The tile still needs to be cleaned off. It's just dusty from the grout, but all the tile was laid and all but a little area was grouted. The guys ran out of grout, so they be left to finish that. So there's that last cabinet that you saw us building. To the right of there is where their washing machine will go and like a wash tub sink. So they can put their laundry baskets and things like that on that shelf. This is the master bathroom. It's pretty much the same as the other one. the same tile. And then this is the master bedroom / office. And right above this is where that covered upper patio is. Those tiles that you saw on the walls of the bathroom there weighed about 15 pounds each. They were really big. So here now you're back out of the main living area and into where they could bring locals who need help or do Bible studies or things like that. There's those trees that you see over there, and then that one right there by the water tower, that's the only trees anywhere near the house. So the house doesn't get any shade immediately around it. And these trees out back are down kind of in an area that's muddy most of the year. So the reason for having this upper porch is that they have a nice area where they'll get a nice breeze through there where they can sit in the shade. It'll be a great place for doing Bible studies and things like that. And then straight across there is the compound we stayed at, the other AWA compound. And where that road bends there, it's actually driving on the runway for a little stretch. So that's where the runway will go. I'm just going to skip that. The last week, I went into Puerto Princesa to go to church at the Adventist Hospital and some other things around Puerto that they took me to that day. Just going to skip that stuff. And then me and Dad went to 67th Heaven our last night there. We were done working, so we went to sleep in a real bed. Our last day there, we didn't leave until the evening because our flight out of Manila would be the next morning. So we spent the night in the Manila airport again. So we went souvenir shopping. You'll see a lot of the things we got on the table out back. These ladies are actually making the wind chimes like the one you'll see out there. And we got to tour the Adventist Hospital where they have these posted all over the place. So if you're the Adventist who walks around with a cane chasing people off the lawn, guess you'll fit in at the Adventist Hospital in Palawan. Is the sound on now? We were blessed with a lot of great music while we were there, so I will leave you with the music we heard at worship one night, and then my dad will have a little bit to finish up.
Sharing love, sharing peace and pardon, but outside in His own place are so many lost and sin. If we keep our lives inside His love, and me. In the love of Christ, let Him lead you and me.
So I told Alex he needed to save me 10 or 15 minutes at the end, and I heard the noon whistle go off 5 minutes ago. This is not going to be good for you if you're hungry. I'm going to cut some of it off of what I had to say, but there's some things that still need to be said. Why should you be involved in missions? I don't know if you've got this Adventist World magazine this last week, but in this magazine, it actually has a section on missions and actually a conference that they held on, and it said, did you know that you're a missionary right now? Doesn't matter if you're across the world or right here in your own backyard, you're a missionary. I just want to read just a couple comments that some of the presenters at this conference, it's called He Said Go, and I actually believe they're going to hold another one that said He Said Go, and they're going to call it He Said Go Again. One of them it's not the same Alex Bryant that Alex knew over at Walla Walla, but it's by G. Alexander Bryant, Executive Secretary of the North American Division, and he says this, he says, whether a mission is across the street, on the other side of the country, or whether it is in Africa or Guam, the challenge is the same. We must first come to Jesus to receive power that is through His Holy Spirit. And then Dwight Nelson, most of you know who that is, lead pastor over at the Pioneer Memorial Church over in Berrien Springs, said this. He said, God does not need the human race to help finish His work, but by going, we are growing. If you don't go, you don't grow. And then one more comes from Gary Krause, the director of Adventist Mission, from the General Conference. It says, missions isn't an event, it's a lifestyle. So why should you be involved in missions? I just want to ask you today, how's your faith? Has your faith become mundane or boring? Or have you lost the love that you first had when Jesus brought you in? Are you tired of church as usual? Let's just take a look at what missions can do for you. In councils on stewardship, and I'm not a big fan of the technology. You see why when we first started, because it failed, but when we were there, Michelle let me take her Kindle along, and thank God for that. I got to read almost all of Ellen Whiting's writings that she had on stewardship and several other chapters. I didn't know how to work it. She has 128 books on here, and I think I only got to see about 6 or 8 of them, but I still was good for me to have. Anyways, it says this one chapter is chapter 7 in the area. It talks about support for foreign missions. It said, the sympathy of God's people should be aroused in every church throughout our land, and there should be unselfish action to meet the necessities of different mission fields. Men should testify to their interest in the cause of God by giving of their substance. This is the important part. If such an interest were manifest, the bond of Christian brotherhood would exist and increase in strength between all the members of Christ's family. This work of faithfully bringing in all the tithes, that there may be meat in the house of God, would supply laborers for both home and foreign fields. Although books and publications upon present truth are pouring out of their treasures of knowledge to all in the world, yet missionary posts must be established at different points. The living preacher must proclaim the words of life and salvation. There are open fields inviting workers to enter. The harvest is ripe, and the earnest Macedonian cry for laborers is heard from every part of the world, and that comes from the Review and Herald back in 1889. And then, I don't know how to work this thing like some people do, but I'm going to get there. In chapter 11 on councils on stewardship, I just want to read one more paragraph, or 2 more paragraphs. It says, God calls upon those who have possessions in lands and houses to sell and invest money where it will supply the great want in the mission field. When once they have experienced the real satisfaction that comes from thus doing, they will keep the channel open and the means the Lord entrusts to them will be constantly flowing into the treasury, that souls may be converted. These souls, in return, will practice the same self-denial, economy, and simplicity for Christ's sake, that they too may bring their offerings to God. Through these talents, wisely invested, still other souls may be converted, and thus the work goes on, showing that the gifts of God are appreciated. The giver is acknowledged, and the glory redounds to him through the faithfulness of his stewards. When we make these earnest appeals on behalf of the cause of God, we present the financial wants of our missions. Conscientious souls who believe the truth are deeply stirred, like the poor widow whom Christ commended, who gave her 2 mites into the treasury. They give, and in their poverty, and to the utmost of their ability. Such, often depriving themselves even of the apparent necessities of life, while there are men and women who, possessing lands and houses, cling to their earthly treasures with selfish tenacity and do not have faith enough in the message and in God to put their means into his work. To these last are especially applicable the words of Christ, sell what you have and give alms. And then if you wanted to go to chapter 12, and I didn't even have that in here as something I was going to read, I wrote down that you should read that for yourself because there's much in that chapter. It's on counsels for stewardship, chapter 12. So if you go on a mission trip, you're going to be let out of your comfort zone. You might not have to sing special music to a bunch of people that you barely know the first time you're out there, but you will be let out of your comfort zone. I was also let out of my comfort zone later in the week because Alex decided on the last week that he would go on a special mission to the church in the hospital church in Puerto Princesa, and my mission was to videotape the service as they would do it there in Sagpangan, right in their regular language, because they don't normally do their church service in English, but they were doing it because we were there in English. And so Tagalog is their main language, and so I set up the camera and I was watching, not understanding very much of it, but getting the gist of where they were at in the service and stuff like that. And after church, I took a few videos of other stuff, and then we came back for that part in the afternoon. That's called AY. And when we weren't there, nobody left the church for that several hours in between the 3 o'clock and the regular church. They slept on those benches that you saw. And so when I was there that last week, I got to see how things really worked when they're not accommodating the foreigners. And so I was talking about going out of your comfort zone anyways. Got halfway through the AY part, and they'd asked me the night before because they knew Alex was going into town and said, who's going to do the message tomorrow? Who's going to preach for us? And I said, well, Edgar, you are, because we want to tape it and we want to have it in your language. And he said, okay, as long as I can do it in my own language, I don't mind doing it. And but we got halfway through the AY, and there was just the special music and then the message for the afternoon that had to be done yet. And the camera battery ran out. And so they said, well, your camera battery's run out. Would you have the message for us? And so I was supposed to do the message, and then they were going to have special music. I said, well, you change it around, and you do the special music, and then while you're doing the special music, I'll think of the message. And lucky for me, I guess it wasn't luck, God probably told me to do it, but the night before I had written down, actually this is the actual page, I'd written down some notes just in case, because it's always good to be prepared. Anyway, so I gave the message that afternoon, and that was actually going a little bit long like it is today, so I actually cut that one short too. You don't think that little page would go that long, but I did go kind of long because I knew it was going to be my last time to talk to them there. And so anyway, that's where you're back to the beginning where we were. We're talking about going out of your comfort zone. You'll have the opportunity to work to make others' lives better. You'll find time for Bible study and worship. You know, a lot of times here we get home and we flip the TV on and we have our supper and all that, and we don't have time to have worship or study the Bible. And when you're there and it gets dark at 6 o'clock and there's no TV for distraction and there's no real internet service, you find time very quickly to have worship and Bible study and that sort of thing. So every night we'd have worship. And you could still be in bed by 8 o'clock, and so you still could get a 10 hours night of sleep. And so the other thing I was going to ask you is, how is your prayer life? You saw Travis in the truck driving back. That was just a short snippet of it. We weren't even out of town yet then. Wait till you get in the mountains and the curvy roads. My prayer life improved much that night on the way home. And it was dark when we were actually on the way home. That part was still in town, but your prayer life will be improved. God will lead you to something that will improve your prayer life if you're on a mission trip. And you will meet incredible people when you're on a mission trip. And so I would just encourage any of you that are having a struggle with your own relationship with the Lord to get involved in missions. This church, I've seen a big change already in the way the church is because of what it said in the Counselors on Stewardship. If you get involved, that every member of the church will be improving and growing closer together. And I just want to encourage you to support missions. Go on a mission trip if you're able. If you're not able, support somebody who is. We've got young people coming up in a year from now. Right about this time, the Academy is going to be sending another mission group down to the Philippines. I've already volunteered. I don't know if they'll use me. I said, if you can use me to go along, I would like to go, but they have a limited amount of people that they can take, so that may not happen. But find a mission, a local mission or a foreign mission, support it, and we'll all grow closer together.